apocalypse, which was prompted by what we see happening around us, and it's a message that we want to take out, especially to the edges of England and places like Scotland, where we think you might be quite receptive to the ideas. It's also because, having written The Red Goddess, one of the things that people find difficult, almost challenging, is when we use the A word, when we actually talk about apocalypse. And one of the issues in working with Babalon is that very often you get quite apocalyptic visions, and some quite unsettling things coming through to you. Obviously that's one of the hazards that I like to bear in mind, that as we are devotees of Babalon, then our work and our ideas are bound to be affected by what she tells us. So please calibrate for your own individual settings and experience, because hopefully I'll be able to take you through some of the ideas that we've been going through, and you'll be able to understand where we're coming from, without us appearing to be paranoid or lunatics or ranting too much.
Yeah,
so
right, that's right.
yeah. So I'm going to read. I'm going to read this and declaim this. So after I finish this, then we'll all be able to talk and knock some ideas backwards and forwards. And it's a fairly roundy piece with the room. Also, just like to say that the references that I'm making to the tower in particular in here, because the majority of this is going to find its way into 16, which is one of our forthcoming books. But we like to do things face to face with this one.
Sorry, there's
Yeah, just
shout
quickly, Peter. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
fire mistakes, I will,
Just-
or Lee will jump up
Yeah,
and attend to it. Don't be shocked.
I won't be shocked if it
By an angry audience.
It happens. The end is no longer nigh. The end is now. It is happening around us, and it is happening within us. Our times are not merely interesting, they are outright apocalyptic. For these times there is one goddess who speaks to us, Babalon, the city mirage image of Jerusalem, an infernal Roma, an Ephesus wormed with speaking catacombs and caves. She tells not simply of the mysteries of sex and the battlefield of love, but of war. And it is high time to talk of war, as the storm clouds are spitting lightning while she dances. We're going to have this all go up in flames at some stage.
Good luck, Peter.
Here before. It's my Jack Parsons impersonation.
Normally get the apocalyptic speakers up near the
Closer, a little bit closer. Even if you've not yet heard Babalon's voice, then you will have seen the evidence of very much radical change in the world. But many of us are reluctant to accept the signs, to confront the very fatal architecture we've put in place. And this is the initiation of our Sweet 16. Why should we be fated to pass over the tower like a reluctant New Age tarot reader? Why fold it back into the deck or undermine the meaning when it is stark in silhouette and devastating in application? I suggest that we consider in our death postures, in our dismemberment and flesh-melting meditations, the destruction not only of the tower, but of the world by the resulting shockwaves. Yet few will dare do this. Apocalypse is an idea mothballed with the Soviet warheads with the Middle Ages and with the revelation of John, in favour of the far more comfortable illusions that flicker across the omnipresent thought screens. Yet fire, as the alchemists knew, is a symbol of renewal, and this is what the tower can bring us. My research has come up with very clear reasons for what I can term apocalypse denial, both in the realms of psychology and brain chemistry, which gives us ways of defeating these internal censors. Also, by examining the world and the career of that great magician John Dee, we can orientate ourselves as modern magicians in a tradition of both apocalypse and revelation, understanding how the events unfolding in the physical world have a hidden or an occult meaning. We can take the brave decision to apply these things to our times, to read the omens in our stars and the tides that influence all men, and further, to traffic with the entities which lie behind them. To confront the tower, we must apprehend it in ourselves and in our lives, rather than simply engage in idle speculation on Darth, however prettily lit in a violet effulgent light. The inability to perceive an impending disaster is what psychology calls normalcy bias. This is the clinical reason why people, even in obvious danger, like from the far behind me, when the Titanic's listing or there's a tsunami moving in, refuse to believe that anything's wrong. They do not run, they do not react, and they do not save themselves. Remember this when you next see the footage of a war or a disaster, and watch the people around them. None of them seem to understand what's happening. Their faces are looked with a mark of this look of incredulity, even as they're destroyed. And this is normalcy bias in action. Our brains are simply not good at processing new information. They tell us, if something has never happened before, then it can't happen now. We are staring squarely at the end of our civilization, the extinction of our species, and the death of life on Earth. And this will be the fate of the majority of mankind. Not running, not reacting, not saving themselves. It is not simply cynicism which defends itself. All our means seek to preserve themselves, and if we do not take conscious control of them, they are quite capable of killing their hosts. The script insists, everything is okay. Babalon is not here. There is no tiger watching us from the long grass. As humans, we are especially vulnerable to slow-moving, well-camouflaged predators. The tiger is simply an indistinct movement in the distance. Perhaps it's nothing at all. So our thoughts turn back, and our attention wanders to our everyday routine. We go back to grazing, we turn the channel on the television, we type in another aimless Google search. As every magician knows, it is extremely difficult to maintain focus without the forced discipline of a structured practice. Even when the tiger erupts from the long grass and devours someone, normalcy bias counsels us to lower our heads and keep grazing. Forget about it. Segregate the tiger attack off as a single anomalous event. And in our working with the beast, we have discovered just how deeply these behaviour patterns are set in man. And man has a history of being prey. Normalcy bias has a particular problem when dealing with metaphysical threats to the species. A good example of this is climate change. Unless you live in a frontline environment, the threat remains pretty abstract. It's a tiger which has been so completely broken up by the mazy overlap of shadows and stripes that we cannot see it at all. When a disaster does occur, normalcy bias says it's a single anomalous event. And this is even easier if it occurs to people with different coloured skin in a different part of our globe. As magicians, our role is not initially to be the tiger, but first to see the tiger, to recognise the patterns, to replicate patterns, and then to change them. An important idea to use here is the martial concept of being open on all 8 sides, which is something you find in most sword schools. And a totem to consider in this work is of course the spider, useful when we're both moving and sitting meditation. In ninjutsu, this level of awareness is called the eyes and mind of God, and it is the only way to survive in the chaos of an ancient battlefield. This is very much the idea that you find martially, that you don't focus entirely on your opponent. If you're looking fixedly at one person, someone over here is going to stab you with a spear and you're not going to know what happens. In magic, we can work the same thing by using totem work with animals such as the spider and developing awareness of our complete surroundings rather than being focused in on one particular thing. The problem with normalcy bias is that it's further reinforced by routine, by social pressure, by mass marketing, and by the media. We are rewarded for repetition rather than risk-taking. Our lives are built on very small programs which define what we eat and drink, how we dress, what we consume, and ultimately what we can see. In this way, our deaths are hidden from us, the predators exterminated, the wars fought elsewhere, the diseases hidden behind screens, and the tower card never turned up in our tarot readings. As magicians, we do not have to settle for this limited vision. It is not inevitable that we will be lulled into a dream world of the advertisers and the archons. We do not have to confine our ideas to the hive mind of an office cube farm. We can extend them far beyond our 9-foot magical circles. As Gnostics, we should be continually challenging all pattern-making behaviour. We can see this in the clowning of Nasruddin or Bill Hicks, in the taboo breaking of Crowley, and in the writing of outsiders such as the Marquis de Sade or Philip K. Dick. But we should not make the mistake of slavishly emulating these exemplars. We must design our own strategies for our own individual architecture. There are clearly universal principles that we can apply to ourselves. In our work with Babalon, sex, drugs, and ordeal are the power tools we use to destroy this dormant state of normalcy bias. Yet at the same time, we must be aware of the ease with which we can replace these patterns with those of indulgence, addiction, and self-mortification. Magic is first and foremost an art, and like war, one with a heavy casualty list. It is in both the small acts that mark our daily practice, and in the crucible of intense ritual practice that our power must be tested. There is no end to this process of self-transformation. When the tiger finally appears from the long grass, and we have overcome our normalcy bias and recognized what it is,